Well, friends, can you all hear me if I speak in this kind of way using a microphone? I think the answer is yes. It's lovely to welcome you here to the church, and also, which is a first for an annual general meeting here at St. Peter Mancroft Church, a warm welcome to those of you who are joining us on YouTube as well. If you are here in person, then if you want to make a spoken contribution to the meeting, please would you come up and use the lectern here so everyone can hear through the sound system. There are one or two people who know they will be coming forward at different points to introduce certain items. If you're attending by YouTube, then you won't be able to come and use the lectern, of course, but what you can do, I hope, is use the what's called the live chat function in the live stream. And my colleague, Michael Winter, who is accomplished beyond measure, I have to say, in these things, will relay your message to me as I attempt to chair these meetings this evening. But it is good. I know there are a few of you who are joining us on YouTube. Thank you for joining us remotely. We're going to open with a prayer, partly because that's a very good thing to do, but partly because technically, legally, this is an act of worship. We can meet in a church for an act of worship if we follow all the guidance. This is an act of worship with a meeting embedded within evening prayer. So let us pray. The Lord Almighty grant us a quiet night and a perfect end. Amen. Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth. Lord God, as we meet at this evening hour, we give you thanks again for your blessings in our lives and your blessings in the life of our church. And we commend our church to you today as we meet to consider all that's happened over the past 2 years and as we consider our hopes for the future. We meet in this season of Eastertide, giving thanks to you for the risen Lord Jesus Christ and the way in which he reveals to us your promise of eternal life. Almighty Father, who in your great mercy gladdened the disciples with the sight of the risen Lord, give us such knowledge of his presence with us that we may be strengthened and sustained by his risen life and serve you continually in righteousness and truth. This we ask through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who is alive and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. I invite you to join with me in praying the words of the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord be with you. So we have 3 meetings this evening, which sounds scary, but it isn't. It's going to be full of blessings, I know. First of all, we have the annual meeting of parishioners, which is formerly was known as the vestry meeting. This is a meeting when we elect 2 church wardens for the coming year. Now, what we should do as we start for all the meetings is take a note of apologies for absence. This is complicated because I don't know if someone attending on YouTube is absent or not. No guidance was available. I will consult with Colin Pordham, who has a book which explains all the rules of church law. And he probably knows, but he's actually indicating perhaps he doesn't know. Stephanie, perhaps as secretary, we can sort of work out. If anyone particularly wanted to give apologies for tonight and you know of that, maybe at the end you could quietly let Stephanie know. We've had 1 or 2 notes from people who aren't able to be here. Election of church wardens. I have 2 forms here in front of me. and our current two church wardens, Peter Threadcurl and Helena Carr, have both been proposed and seconded and have both indicated their agreement to stand again for the year. Are you happy that they should be elected as church wardens for the coming year? All in favour, please raise their hands. And any against? Unanimously elected. Thank you to Peter, thank you to Helena, and there's some other paperwork we'll sort out at the end of the meeting to square all that up. I declare that first meeting closed. Right, this is an unusual year in that we now have two annual parochial church meetings. And the first one is, in fact, one that we should have held last year. That meeting, we had a date, we were all set, but it had to be, in the end, cancelled for reasons that you all know about to do with the pandemic. However, there was dispensation from the diocese that it was possible not to hold an APCM last year and carry it forward and have a combined one this year, and that's what we decided to do. So, we're going to run through the business for a shortened version of business for the APCM last year. Is that okay? Is everyone clear what we're doing? So, first of all, an electoral roll update. I hope you've all got sight of the agenda, or if not, follow through as I guide us through. First of all, the electoral roll update. Leela, thank you so much for being our electoral officer. You indicated to me that at the meeting that would have been held a year ago, the number on the electoral roll would have been 111 people. So that's to report that to the meeting. I'm now going to give a short verbal report on the proceedings of the PCC in 2019, which met 6 times. On the 14th of January, basically amongst a few other things, that was when the new vicar was very new, and it was connected with initial impressions of said new vicar. The next meeting was 25th of March. This is 2019, so more than 2 years ago. There was discussion about the use of the Octagon Room, the staffing arrangements in the Verger team, plans for the southwest corner of the church, and also discussion about the ministry experience scheme and whether we might begin a scheme of our own at this church. Then on the 13th of May, the PCC met, and there was an update and a full report about our communications and publicity, which Anne Tansley-Thomas led. There was a discussion about the reimagined use of the Anne Chapel and possibly giving it the additional name of the Earth Chapel. And then there was also discussion about our relationship with Norwich Deaf Church. Of course, there were other things, regular reports, but these are the highlights of these meetings. On the 15th of July, the PCC met and discussed a link to the John Aves Education Project, which is a charity. And also there was an update on quite an extended discussion about the Bells exhibition in the southwest corner and upstairs in the Mancroft Ringing Discovery Centre. Then on the 23rd of September, so this is still a year and a half ago, there was the quinquennial report was received by the PCC, discussed briefly. Also, a prospective lighting project, working on the lighting in the church, was discussed. And the question of a new guidebook was also discussed, and agreement was given that we might go ahead on producing a new guidebook for visitors. And then on the 18th of November, the PCC met. The question of the leases that the Mancroft Advice Project have at the Chantry Hall was discussed at quite some length. Those leases are actually between the Mission Hall Trust and the Mancroft Advice Project, but the PCC is always consulted and gives advice. And a question of a plaque for Mary Chapman, local figure from history, was discussed, and also the charitable donations that would be made from the PCC to other charities with aligned purpose was also agreed. So that summarises the 6 meetings that the PCC held in 2019. Are there any questions or comments that anyone wants to make? Hopefully you're happy to receive that update. And also I can confirm, as needs to be done, that the PCC complied to the best of its knowledge with the House of Bishops' guidance on safeguarding during that year. So that completes item 2 of this second of our 3 meetings. Item 3 connects to the financial statements for the year ended 31st of December 2019. So that's not this year's accounts, it's the year before. Those accounts obviously normally would have been received by the AGM and adopted by them, I suppose, in some way. However, that couldn't happen last year. The PCC and the Standing Committee dealt with all of that as we took advice, and that was a right and proper way of doing it. And they've been lodged with the Charity Commissioners. That was in September of last year, so a number of months ago. They're in the public domain, and some of you may indeed have looked up on the Charity Commissioners website and scrutinised the PCC accounts for 2019, which would have been presented at the 2020 AGM. Hope I'm making sense. So I hope it's acceptable to note that at this shortened meeting that should have been held a year ago. Of course, in a practical sense, this year's accounts include last year's numbers by way of comparison. So you can actually see quite clearly, if you've got this year's accounts, last year's numbers as well. And indeed, if you've any questions, I suggest we leave it till the next meeting, Jeff, when you're at the front speaking about the financial affairs of the church. You can perhaps take any questions from the year before as well. Is that acceptable to the meeting? I can see some nods, so that's good. We'll press on. Now we come to item 4 of last year's APCM, and I think it would be good, if possible, Helena, I think it's you on behalf of Peter and Helena, to give a short fabric report for the year 2019. So I'll hand over to you briefly.
So yes, so this is just a very brief summary of some of the major sort of fabric changes or decisions that were made in 2019. There was most prominently a major cleaning of the organ that took place. There were some minor repairs to stonework near the octagon entrance and some cleaning of the octagon skylight windows. A stained oak worktop made by Nick Jackson was installed at the back on the back of a bench in the old children's corner, just over there, to allow coffee and other drinks to be easily served at the back of the church. A new boiler was fitted in March of 2019. Some work to replace loose paving underneath and around the tower was completed. And some unsafe trees were cut down on the north side of the churchyard and replaced with new trees. And then also some signage was installed in the Chantry car park as part of a new scheme to offer paid parking spaces on Saturdays.
Thank you, Helena. Are there any questions to the church wardens connecting to that brief report? Can't see any hands waving, so thank you again very much indeed to you both. And then the final item of business for last year's APCM is Deanery Synod elections. It's slightly strange to be electing 3 Deanery Synod candidates now for a term that began a year ago, but there we are. That's just the way things have gone. A lot of things have been very strange, of course, over the last year. We have 3 spaces, and I have 3 nominations here. And they are, to do it completely formally and properly, Geoffrey Loads and Janet Steele and Geoffrey Woolsey-Brown. Perhaps if the 3 of you, you're all here, do you mind just standing up and just wave so people actually know? There we are. So you've all been proposed and seconded. Unless there are any last-minute forms that someone's going to thrust into my hand, may I suggest that we thank those 3 people for agreeing to stand and that we elect them en bloc. Is everyone happy with that? Perhaps you'd raise your hands if you're in agreement. Thank you very much. Good, so elected. It's a moment also to thank those who have served on the Deanery Synod. In fact, Jeff Woolsey-Brown, you're continuing for another term, so thank you for enduring. But also, I believe Carolyn Cross, you were one of our Deanery Synod reps. Thank you so much for serving in that way. And the other person who was on the Deanery Synod but actually stood down a year ago was Richard Turk. He started training for ministry, so he stood down at that point. So we now have a full slate of 3 candidates. It's a 3-year term, but you've instantly already done a year. So how about that? 2 years for the price of 3, which in this sense is actually a bargain, I think, probably. The 2 rural deans will be delighted. So thank you very much indeed. We haven't put a note for any other business for last year's APCM. If anyone feels there is anything else we should have addressed, now's your moment, again, please, to wave your hand. Michael, do we have any comments from those attending remotely? No, that's great. All nice and quiet, so that's great. Fantastic. Thank you so much. In which case, I declare that meeting closed. And we come to our 3rd meeting, which is the annual parochial church meeting for this year, happening on the right day and connecting to the matters that have happened in the life of the church in the year 2020. So this meeting will be longer than the other 2, just to warn you, in case you were thinking we'd all be done in another 5 minutes. So first of all, we have minutes. And the guidance was that we didn't try and have minutes of the meeting we just had 1 minute ago. We would have minutes from the meeting that was held 2 years ago. Now, we didn't have we couldn't track down a written minute, but I'm going to give a verbal minute, which I think is acceptable. I can't see if Colin's objecting at this stage. So this is a minute that we can make a note of, Stephanie, if that's okay. So this was the annual general meeting held on the 11th of April 2019, so more than 2 years ago. There were opening prayers and a welcome. There was election of church wardens, Peter Threadcall and Helena Carr, with warm thanks to Richard Turk, who stepped down as church warden at that meeting. That was the meeting of parishioners. Then the annual parochial church meeting. So minutes from the year before, in 2018, were read and agreed. That was the APCM that Ian Bentley was here as priest in charge for anyone who's been around that long. Presentation of the electoral roll happened. There was the appointment of deputy wardens. There was the election, this is the meeting 2 years ago, there was the election of John Sutton to the PCC. Of course, sadly, John has died in the meantime, but he did serve on the PCC after that, having earlier been did. And there were thanks to Cherry Mosley, who stood down from the PCC at that point. The sides people were appointed. Then the annual report and financial statements of the PCC for the year ended 31st of December 2018 were presented by the Treasurer, Jeff Loads, and received by the meeting. And I don't believe there actually were any questions, but this is where the minutes are a little bit hazy. And the appointment of auditors was also agreed by the meeting. There was a report given on the fabric of the church building, and the inventory was submitted to the meeting. Church policies were presented and adopted, and then the customary booklet with reports from organisations was also received by the meeting, and warm thanks were expressed to all those who contribute to the life of the church in so many ways at that meeting. I think there was a short report on proceedings of the Deanery Synod as well, and then there was it says a report from the vicar in the agenda from 2 years ago. And it was, you'll remember the vicar was very new at that stage 2 years ago. So it was, again, initial impressions and hopes and aspirations. But also there was news of, that was the day actually when the decision to undertake the ministry experience scheme, which we've seen so much fruit from, that was the day that was announced actually at the APCM and was warmly received. And then there were closing prayers, and the meeting closed. So that's a verbal minute of that meeting 2 years ago. Is everyone happy that that minute should be, dare I say it, signed? I'm not quite sure. We'll work that one out. Back to this meeting. Electoral roll. Leela, thank you again for preparing the electoral roll. That was published and available here in church for people to inspect. Maybe you had a chance to have a look at it and make sure it's correct. And there are, in fact, 111 people on this electoral roll. So hopefully you're happy to receive that as a meeting. I'm going to hand over now for the next two items, 3 and 4, to the church wardens. One of the church wardens might be you, Peter, I think, to speak to the appointment of deputy church wardens and the appointment of sides people. So thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Well, good evening. We have deputy church wardens in this church, and they're very helpful. They're appointments, not elected, and they're very helpful in helping Helen and I at the various services that we hold. As hopefully in the future there'll be more and more services, so they're very helpful. The present 4 wish to continue. It's Colleen Frost, Doris Shea, Geoffrey Woolsey-Brown, and Roger Youngman. So I'll pass this list to the secretary afterwards, and she can incorporate the details in the minutes. Regarding the sides people, not quite such good news. We have 12 active sides people at the moment. During the year, and since lockdown has eased, various people have said they don't want to continue, or they don't want to come back yet. So we're down to 12 people. I don't know if I need to read the names out, do I, Edward, or shall I just pass them?
Perhaps if you would quickly, it'd be nice. Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
okay.
If
If I can remember, Richard Barton, Tony Burton, who's not very well at the moment, David Bush, Maureen Cubitt, Sue Darnell, Joan Halcombe, Andrew Hawker, Jim Hughes, Richard and Ruth Ottaway, my other half, called Leela, Judy Wells, and Geoffrey Woolsey-Brown. I'm not sure whether he can continue or not, but we're not going to worry about that. But we put a plea in the newsletter lately for more sides people to support us, but unfortunately we've had no response. So I think that's an issue of concern during the year as the number of services increase and more cover to help support the clergy is needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I'm confident we'll have just the right number of, the Lord will provide the right number of sides people that we need. But I want to thank both you, Peter, and you, Helena, for overseeing that part of our life. And indeed, those of you who do serve as sides people, and any who aren't here at the meeting, very warmly indeed. It's a very important role to welcome people to worship. So thank you indeed for that. And a thank you to our 4 deputy church wardens as well for supporting the work of the church wardens. Does anyone have any questions or comments on either of those items that the church wardens might address? Can't see any hands, so that's great, thank you. We do have an item on the agenda which is right and proper, we should, appointment of 2 scrutineers. I think if you're happy, we might leave that. I don't think we'll need scrutineers this evening. So are you happy we might move on and not address that? It would be rather complicated to do a ballot in a socially distanced way without handling items that others had handled. So unfortunately, I don't think we'll need to tonight. So we come on to item 6, which is a report on the proceedings of the PCC in 2020. And I'd like to give a verbal report to the meeting now. The PCC met on the 20th of January 2020, and amongst the items it considered was the prospective licensing of Lorna Allies as assistant priest at the church, which was welcomed and approved. Also plans for a giving campaign later in the year were discussed. And it was agreed that after the success of the Ministry Experience Scheme in its first year, that the PCC wished to continue it for a second year. And that was approved as well. There were other more sort of housekeeping matters, but those were the highlights of that meeting. There was due to be a PCC meeting on the 23rd of March 2020. However, that was only, I think, about a day or two after the first of the pandemic lockdowns, and there was a strict stay-at-home order. And so it was agreed that we would cancel that meeting. We didn't see any way of being able to hold that meeting. So that was cancelled. Then we're into innovation territory, because on the 18th of May, the PCC met on Zoom, this mysterious thing that none of us had heard of before any of the lockdowns, but which now we all at least know about. So the PCC met, I have to say, successfully, very successfully on Zoom on the 18th of May. A significant part of that meeting, other than getting to grips with making Zoom work, was actually connected to our hopes for the future. We were trying to be forward-looking. We were obviously addressing the challenges that we were facing, still at that stage unable to meet in the church at all, really, for worship. The church hadn't even been opened at all at that stage to visitors. But we nonetheless, as a PCC, addressed our hopes for the future, began to look ahead. We also noted and discussed the furlough arrangements for our staff team. We also, part of looking ahead, considered the question of becoming what's called a Heart Edge hub church. The Heart Edge network is a national network rooted at St Martin in the Fields in London, and they were keen, we were keen to become a hub church for the Eastern region. And although the PCC itself delegated that decision to the Standing Committee, it was discussed and agreed that the Standing Committee be encouraged to give approval to that step. And there was also discussion and approval in principle given to the laying up of the standard of the combined service veterans, which needs to come to a permanent home. That's still work in progress, I should add. And there were other matters, I'm sure, but those were the highlights of that meeting on the 18th of May on Zoom. Then the PCC met on the 13th of July, again on Zoom. At that meeting, a significant item of business was the proposed installation of a new live streaming system for the church, which was given approval. And also a discussion was held about plans for worship after the pandemic, which I think means, as we've worked our way through whatever after the pandemic really means. Again, looking ahead to new patterns or rediscovering old patterns of worship. Then on the 28th of September, the PCC met again on Zoom. There was a review of what I'm calling our eco ministry, our ministry connected to care for the environment and God's creation. There was a decision made unanimously to embark on becoming an eco church, which is a program with proper credentials, and that was agreed, and we've done that. And also our links to other campaigning groups in the field of green issues. It was a helpful discussion. There was also a discussion about a crib set for the church that year, and a suggestion made that it would make a good community engagement project if we wanted to do something with the crib. And indeed that came to fruition. I think that was probably also, it definitely was the meeting when this roof repair was discussed. And although I think probably the PCC again delegated that decision to the Standing Committee and or Asset Management Committee in detail, but nonetheless gave overall approval, obviously, that should go ahead at the right moment. So that was the meeting on the 28th of September. Then on the 23rd of November, again meeting on Zoom, the PCC received a budget for 2021 and approved it. And amongst other matters, also agreed our charitable donations for the year 2020. And I can confirm again that the PCC complied to the best of its knowledge with the House of Bishops' guidance on safeguarding. That's a statutory requirement to report that to this meeting. You'll see that the PCC has worked hard despite losing a meeting. An awful lot has been considered, and I want to thank warmly those who've served on the PCC. Are there any questions or comments that anyone wishes to make in response to that report? It looks as though you're happy to receive that with no further scrutiny, which is absolutely wonderful. Thank you. So, we now move on to items, certainly item 7 and then probably item 8, And I'm looking to our PCC Treasurer, Jeff Loads. Jeff, are you happy to come forward to the microphone, to the lectern, and speak to the annual accounts? Thank you very much indeed.
Good evening, everyone. I think 2020 was a slightly unusual year so far as the finances of St Peter Mancroft were concerned. Two or three thanks, first of all, in terms of, before I do my review for the year. One is thanks to internet banking. That without internet banking, I think last year would have been extremely difficult because we have something like 40 or 50 payments out each month, and to actually sign checks remotely for that would have been a difficult thing. Thanks also to email, and the fact that email helped Harold, our excellent finance officer, who did a great deal of work from home in preparing payments to go out, payments to come in and the like, and communications between Harold and I by email, occasionally by telephone, but normally email, were a great boon. And again, I think without modern technology, I think the pandemic which we've had in terms of financial activities would have been very, very difficult indeed, and very difficult for the church. Normally at these meetings, you have copies of the accounts in front of you, and I tend to go through them page by page. But the accounts have been sent out via the website. One or two of you might have printed off all 30 pages and brought with you. I doubt very much whether, in fact, many of you did. So if you can bear with me, and I'll just read my financial review, which I put into that 2020 review. I started by saying, inevitably, the pandemic had a major influence upon our financial management for 2020. But the position at the end of the year was markedly better than first feared. Our initial view in March 2020 was that our budget outcome for the year would deteriorate by well over £30,000. We knew that the hire of the church and Chantry Hall would not be possible, and we did make refunds made with all of those who had paid deposits for bookings which had been made for the Chantry Hall. We felt that it would be good, even though we were not liable to make refunds of deposits because of the circumstances, and quite frankly, to keep prospective hirers sweet, it was actually a good idea to refund deposits to them, and hopefully some of those hirers which were there going to have in the beginning of 2020 will come back to us in 2021 and 2022. Collections and donations in offertory boxes would not be forthcoming, and we assumed this would be the case for much of the remainder of the year. We also felt that dividend income would be reduced perhaps by as much as 50%, and that stock markets take some time beyond 2020 to recover from the then significant falls. Values of our own funds at that time in March 2020 had fallen in excess of £150,000. We also anticipated that grant giving from both the Risborough and Vicarage Trusts would likely be impacted because they have investment portfolios and they would suffer in the same way as we were going to do. We took the decision to continue to pay our staff in full and to take advantage of the furlough scheme such that 80% of the costs would be recovered. As we moved through the year, we began slowly to reopen slowly reopen. The furlough scheme reduced in the quantum of effect. However, the total recovery at nearly £32,000 was a great benefit and greatly assisted in our operating flexibility. Much of our normal expenditure, such as parish share and insurance, continued, as did utility costs, or those albeit with somewhat lower levels. Cash management required greater focus because of the reduction in day-to-day income. However, the benefit of stewardship was evident in that planned giving remained at the level seen in 2019. We were also fortunate in receiving legacies totaling over £75,000 and specific donations in excess of £10,000. These assisted in our cash flow, particularly towards the end of the year. Dividend income held up much better than expected, and the net results of our operations was a deficit of £16,345, which ironically, given the challenges, was better than the 2019 deficit of just over 49,000. Also, despite our earlier concerns, an investment surplus of 12,000 was achieved. In 2019, we did actually have a 92,000 gain in investment, resulting in an overall deficit for the year of £4,205. In 2019, there was a surplus of 43,000. So despite our concerns at the beginning of March 2020, the results for 2020 were somewhat better than we had anticipated, largely due to the receipt of the legacy, largely due to the benefit of the furlough scheme. Despite the turbulence in the year, several relatively small capital items were dealt with, and in particular the installation of the streaming system at a cost of just over 12,000, and that's before we receipt of grants and donations of just over £7,000. I think we felt that despite all of the concerns which were present with our financial activities, it was right that we continued to invest in the church's operations and consider what would be happening in the future rather than dwell too miserably on the problems which we're having in 2020 itself. And I think we had the reserves, and we have got the reserves, to enable us to take some significant actions to help in the overall running of the church. Our reserves were not as adversely affected as was feared and remained strong. This strength encouraged us to proceed with the necessary work on the South Island transept roof, which was a requirement of the 2019 quinquennial review. The closure of the church was seen as an ideal opportunity, meaning that the work did not need to be done at a time when it is back to normal use and open to all. The total cost is somewhere in the region of £250,000, net of VAT, which is being recovered. Approximately 30,000 of that cost had been accounted for in the 2020 figures, for instance, architects' fees and the like. Our cash reserves at the end of 2020 are deliberately high, requiring some realisation of investments in the autumn to provide for the necessary prompt payment of invoices. I believe it's best to actually store up cash when you've got the opportunity rather than to have a fast sale of investments, but possibly an incorrect time. 2021 will be challenging, and we are budgeting for a significant deficit, anticipating that normality is still somewhat distant. When we are able, we'll need to move quickly to seek ways of restoring income, particularly through active use of all our resources. Hopefully this church will be available more for hire as we progress through the year, and we are keen that the Chantry Hall, under the stewardship now of Len Hobson, in terms of improving the letting ability of the Chantry Hall. Planned giving, as I've said, has been of much comfort to us, but it is hoped that we can continue to build on this such that we are able to withstand the challenges the pandemic has brought. So in conclusion, as I said, 2020, about this time last year, was looking a bit bleak in terms of financial. At the end of the year, it proved to be much better than we had feared, and we are still in a very strong position, and the work which we're doing now on the roof will help us to actually withstand some floods in the next few years. So thank you very much. If there are any questions, please let me know.
So do you mind, Colin, if you actually did come up to use the microphone? Yeah, please do. You might have to do a bit of microphone sharing. Thank you. It just means everyone can hear, and those attending remotely can also hear as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Just one or two things. Jeff, thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's very reassuring that there have been donations of over £17,000 during the course of last year. A number of those, I think, were anonymous, but we really do thank all those who've made generous gifts during the year. But I just want to highlight the legacies, because I know, Jeff, you're always keen to encourage people to mention Mancroft in their wills. And clearly in 2020, we're always sorry to lose our parishioners, but it was very good that they did remember Mancroft, and over £75,000 was left. Now, there's no indication in these accounts as to whether that 75 people have left £1,000 each, or whether it's a single person who's left 75,000. And I think it would be very helpful, and actually, I think members of the congregation do like to know who has left significant amounts to the church. And we have, in the past, I know, recorded those in our annual account so that the record is there. It may be in the PCC minutes, but I think it's good if they can be recorded in the annual account. So perhaps we could see that that happens in the future. I have a second question which relates to the bell chamber. I just felt it would be helpful to be reminded about the costings there, because there's the staff of the bell chamber, there's an item that it comes out of restricted funds of 8,700. My understanding was, when the centre was established, that there'd be no cost falling on the PCC. And I wasn't quite able to work that out from the various funds, Jeff, whether that really is the case. And one final point relates really to the previous year. There's a charitable donation to, I think it's EMAP. Was it to EMAP? And I've no idea who they are.
I think that might have been a charity suggested by Tony Shea, but that's only from memory.
Right.
I believe if it's the one I'm thinking of, that's a charity that...
The other charities were all very familiar to most of us, but I didn't. No, it's not EMAP. It's called REMAP. REMAP.
Yeah. I believe that's a charity that Tony Shea suggested, and the PCC considered it and was very keen to support, involved with providing work opportunities for people who otherwise might struggle to find their place in the world of work, I think. Can anyone on the PCC help me? Right, you're making items for disabled people as well.
Right,
yeah.
Excellent.
It felt like a good local charity
Yes.
that was aligned with our purpose.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jeff, are you happy to take those questions, first
you.
two questions from Colin?
I feared Colin when he started to saying about legacies, and I know that Jeff wants to encourage. I thought he was going to say encourage people to die, but I'm sure I don't think you meant that, Colin. In terms of the legacies, yes, we did in previous years list all of the legacies given. We haven't done it this year, and I regret if that's something which should have been included. The significant legacy was from the estate of Robin Hubbard, where we did get a significant benefit some 2 years ago from an insurance policy. I sometimes just get slightly concerned when we list donations and ascribe them people's to names. If you have one big one and then one or two very generous donations, much smaller, where the comparisons could be made, was that person being particularly generous or not generous? So I think there's a double-edged sword there, Colin, sometimes in publishing names to the legacies. So perhaps the PCC can give it some thought. So far as the Bellring is concerned, they are still in receipt of some of the Heritage Lottery funds, and part of the grant which was given from the Heritage Lottery Fund was for the Interpretation Centre and the costs of people running that. So it is a restricted fund because it came from the HLF, but it's not a cost which the PCC itself bore. The Heritage Lottery Fund provided funds to the bell ringers for that. That fund will not continue in the future, and we do need to consider how the operation of the bell ringing and the interpretation centre is done. But that's for the future rather than for the now. The last question, I think, has already been answered, I think, Colin. Any other questions? Anything come through on Zoom? No? Oh, that's a relief then. I was wondering how I could answer things on the Zoom. But any other questions? Peter?
Jeff, do you mind?
Better.
That's right. Give Peter some space on the microphone. Thank you.
I wonder, Jeff, if you, when you invest money, realise we're not investing at the moment because of the roof. Do you have a policy, like, for example, Salvation Army, not buying shares in certain types of company? What is the investment policy that you go for? Thank you.
We strictly follow the Church of England's ethical investment policy. So all of our investments are within that. It's sometimes difficult to follow completely everything according to that because for instance, if we didn't want to invest in tobacco, do you then not invest in supermarkets which sell cigarettes and the like? So it's a very sort of fine line, but all of our investments are following the Church of England's ethical investment policy.
And I think I would just add to that, because I'm very interested in all of that field, that we do scrutinise that very question with our investment managers, don't we, Jeff?
Yes, we do.
When we
Yes.
meet with them,
Yeah.
and we make sure that they're following exactly that line. Thank you for that question.
Fine. Can I just conclude just by thanking once again Harold, who does a tremendous amount of work. He does all of the work, and I take the glory in terms of presenting the accounts.
Jeff, thank you. I mean, Harold does a lot of work, but you do a lot of work as well, and I'm personally very grateful to you for all your support and expertise and wisdom. Could we give Jeff a round of applause, please? Because he really does do an awful lot on our behalf. And perhaps we could minute some thanks
Thank you very much.
to our treasurer. The accounts are beautifully well presented, very timely, and I'm just extremely grateful, both to you, Jeff, and also to those who serve on the Asset Management Committee as they work with that part of our life. Thank you again. We do have appointment of auditors. Is that something, Jeff, that you need to say anything about? Sorry. Hoik you back up to the front. Hopefully this won't be too controversial or difficult.
Our auditors are Lovell Blake. They have been our auditors for quite a few years now. We do have a good relationship, but not a cosy relationship with Lovell Blake. They have been actually very supportive. Again, it's been difficult both this year and last year in terms of dealing with the audit of accounts because they need all of the files, how you get the files to them, how do you communicate and the like. They do change their audit team from time to time, but I would certainly be very happy and was content for Lovell Blake to continue as our auditors for the coming year.
So that's a proposal from our treasurer. All in favour? I think the meeting is in favour. Thank you, Jeff. We come now to item 9, which is the Church Warden's report on the fabric and submission of the inventory. And Helena, we're, I think, in your hands for this item.
Yes, I'll do the fabric report, and Peter will come up and discuss the inventory.
The inventory, okay. Shared, collaborative work, fantastic.
So, so just for the last report, which was 2019, I kept that fairly brief, but I just wanted to, at the beginning of this report for sort of the 2020, well, mostly 2020 into 21, to say a thank you to our fabric officer, Nick Jackson, for all the work that he does. He took over from the excellent work of Roger Youngman for, sort of in the last couple of years, and he's really done a huge amount of work, not just on the bigger projects, but just generally around the church on a regular basis. And also to thank some of the people who kind of keep the fabric in good shape, really. So particularly our verger team and our head verger in particular, Chris Salmon, who's kept the building going through the last year, through the pandemic, and has been overseeing some of the big projects, which I'll mention in a minute. So Chris and Gus, I'd like to thank them. and also Dawn, who is, cleans the church and keeps it in a beautiful state. I think we could all agree. So those are the people that I'd like to thank particularly in relation to the fabric, keeping the fabric going, and also our Chris and Diana in the Chantry as well, who also do a lot to look after that building. Okay, so this year we have had remarkably quite a lot of activity in terms of fabric, considering that the church has been for quite a lot of that time in sort of lockdown or semi-lockdown. At the beginning of the year, we had, perhaps some of you will have noticed, considerable work done on the churchyard gates and fences. This included a complete overhaul of the westward gates at the, just by the tower at the back there, and a new keypad lock fitted to the octagon gate, and repairs to the south churchyard gates, just over here. And there was some general sort of repainting and repairs to the other gates around the building. Really pleased to say that we had a completion of the long-running bell-ringing exhibition sort of space, which is in the southwest corner, which you can't see today, unfortunately, but hopefully we will be able to enjoy again once the scaffolding is down. That was something that has been worked on very hard by, in particular, Fran Jackson and Anne Tansley-Thomas, so big thanks to them for all their work on that, and finally came to fruition in 2020, so that's something that we'll be able to really appreciate soon again. We also, obviously, perhaps the biggest project of the year was the South Aisle roof project, which you can all see in evidence is still taking place. This included repairing the lead and sort of general repairs to the South Aisle roof, which has been something that's been needed to be done for a very long time. So we're very pleased to have finally been able to complete this particular task. In addition to the roof, because we've had the scaffolding up there, we've taken advantage of that by doing some cleaning of the windows and the walls in the South Aisle as well, and some various other things have taken place, including some sort of temporary sort of electrical changes as well. So there's been quite a lot of work that's gone into that, and I again would like to thank Nick Jackson for his work on that, and Chris for kind of overseeing that project. There have also been some cleaning and repairs of the windows in the upper sacristy, so that has taken place. There was a rather dramatic small flood in the choir vestry during the sort of the lockdown, which was nobly dealt with by Chris, and fortunately only resulted in some superficial damage. The main result of which we made an insurance claim, but the main result of that is a new carpet fitted down there. And there is already been mentioned tonight the new camera and streaming system, which was fitted at the beginning of the first lockdown last year, which has allowed us to film services and events in the church and do them, sort of live stream them, which obviously is happening tonight. So that was a very welcome and hopefully long-term beneficial change to the church fabric. Also, some of you will have already noticed over the last year that there is a temporary, perhaps sort of, and hopefully maybe longer term addition to the north side churchyard with some additional picnic tables there, which have been put there to allow the space to be used by the Brick Pizza Company in a sort of relationship that the church has built up over the lockdown to allow that small local business to continue to thrive in the current kind of pandemic circumstances. The sort of more longer term future of that will be discussed after, once hopefully we return to normal circumstances. And those can be used also by the church and we have used them for small picnics at various points last summer. And finally, we have an upcoming installation of a plaque commemorating Mary Chapman, which I think was briefly mentioned earlier, who was the founder of the Bethel Hospital. So that installation and a small kind of ceremony connected to that will take place next year, I think.
Yes, I mean, the faculty's been granted and the plaque is here in the building, just needs fixing on the wall, and as you say, some kind of ceremony to mark that.
Yeah.
We'll report that at next year's APCM.
Yeah, that's forthcoming, but it is a decision that has been made. So, yeah, so that's all I have to say on that. Any questions at all about the fabric? Or any major things I've missed, which I'm sorry if I have.
Looks
No?
like you're in the
No?
clear, Helena.
Okay.
Thank you. You're handing the baton to Peter, I think, for the inventory to start with, and then the policies, yes. Thank you.
Well, I have an inventory here which is not totally up to date because it's prepared in 2019, but with the church closed for a lot of time of the year and what's going on over to my left, we haven't got an inventory for 2020. But as soon as this bit of the church is free, I intend, with the help of the verger, to go through and check the inventory and add things to it that are needed. So rest assured, it's not forgotten, it's been postponed, and I have a full copy of the 2019 one here, so it will be built on this one. So an inventory that we have to be done, and there'll be various things added to it, but I can't, without double checking it, know what it's going to be at the moment. Sorry?
I mean, if anyone's any questions about that, then you're entitled to ask. But I hope that's acceptable to the meeting, given these unusual circumstances that we're in. It was a very good 2019 inventory.
Yes, it is. If you want to look at it, I mean, you can look at it after the
There are
meeting.
probably a few incremental changes, but
Yes, there
nothing
will
of
be.
major substance. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Policies.
Policies. Well, I have copies of the policies here, which I'm not going to read out. I'll just read out the titles, and they have to be presented for adoption. We have a policy on loan working, a policy on safeguarding children and adults, on safeguarding vulnerable adults, which I think overlaps a bit, and a policy on domestic abuse, and a new policy, which we haven't seen, media visits to the tower and the bell chamber, which I thought was quite an unusual one, but I didn't prepare, and have one that needs revising quite a bit, which I didn't realise, because it's got to be revised now, is the health and safety. And I have to work in conjunction with the verger on that one because he is responsible for that one. So we have all the policies in place, and they all have, the particular policies have to be renewed at this particular meeting. Any general questions from anybody, please?
Are you happy to receive that report on our policies? And they're obviously kept under review, and the PCC considers those as needed.
Well,
I think probably there are no questions.
No, I don't think so.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much indeed.
Thank you.
To you, Helena, as well, to you both, for overseeing all that part of our life. We come now to item 11 on the agenda, presentation of reports from different parts of the church's life. And in fact, we just took the decision to combine the 2 years into the booklet, which you either had a chance to look at on your computer or maybe print out, or there were 1 or 2 copies provided printed this evening. There was an opportunity to ask for a copy to be sent by post if you wanted. It would be foolish to read through it line by line, of course, at a meeting such as this, but I hope you've had a chance to enjoy reading it. It's meant to be a fairly comprehensive account of our life from different perspectives. However, I suspect there probably are a few gaps or things that could have been described in a slightly more full way. Nonetheless, it's a really good record of 2 extraordinary years, particularly 2020, of course, and many of the reports reflect the unusual nature of the past 2 years. But there are some new things that wouldn't have been there before. For example, the craft group, which is new. There are some, also the drama group, which I know the Mancroft Players is a venerable institution from years gone by, but however, this is a sort of new iteration of that particular ministry. There are reports that will have been given to this meeting year by year, the flower ranges, for example, but of course, each report reflects the particular character and texture of the period in question. There's a report on media and communications, which of course feels very different now compared to any we would have received before. And there's a good report on the Mission Hall Trust. We're trying to, thank you Len Hobson for that report, we're trying to give a bit more profile to the Mission Hall Trust, which is the trust that operates the Chantry Hall site. Very much working with the PCC, but nonetheless it is a separate trust and charity. I ended up writing the music department report because, of course, Jodie is away on maternity leave. And Rob, thank you for being here, Rob, and looking forward to having a conversation with you in a moment. But would have been very unfair to ask you to write a report on 2 years when you weren't actually here. So I wrote a report to cover 2019 and 2020. You will note as well that there's a report, thank you, Peter, for this, about Noah's Ark, slightly poignant report saying that in the end, that's really the end of the road for Noah's Ark, simply because it hasn't been able to meet now for well over a year. And that kind of group only really continues because it cycles, new people arrive all the time. And it's an opportunity to consider again how we might conduct ministry with the preschool age and indeed with children in general. And that's very much something that the ministry team and others are thinking about at the moment, how we can revive and refresh and renew all of that very, very important ministry. It does mean that a member of staff, Kim Afonso, we had to let her go during last year because it became clearer and clearer that Noah's Ark would not be restarting. I'm not going to try giving even a summary of all the different reports, but I hope you've enjoyed reading about all of the different aspects of our life. But it is now a moment, if anyone wanted to ask any particular questions or make any comments or ask about anything, alongside that booklet and the reports, there's also what's called a review of 2019 and 2020 in a slightly more newsy style with photographs and giving an account of the 2 years. So I hope you've had a chance to see that. It's been sent to some people and has been available for anyone to either request or download from the website. I think I'm probably going to leave it at that in terms of introducing that item on the agenda. It's a take note item, as we're not resolving in any particular way on this or approving or disapproving of anything. We're receiving what is actually an extraordinary amount of life and offering. And as I look again, I looked earlier today through the booklet, I read again the review, and as I did so, I actually had a tingle down my spine and was humbled at all the various things that are happening and the amazing thing that this church is under God, the amazing things that are happening. And actually, dare I say it, without wanting to sound like I'm boasting, how well we've done over the last year as well, how much life we have kept going. I'm certainly not trying to compare us with other churches, but there are other churches in the diocese, some not far away, which have been very dormant actually over the past year. And I don't think anyone could claim that we've been at all dormant or asleep. Does anyone have any comments or questions, either on the booklet and the reports, or maybe in response to the review? Are you happy to take note of those and to, without having to vote on it, express your gratitude for all of that? And indeed, of course, many, if not all of you, are deeply involved in that life, and I want to thank you all very much indeed for that. I'm going to move us on to a report on the proceedings of the Deanery Synod during 2019 and 2020, which is one of the things that the Apcm should receive. and this is a quick verbal report. So going back more than 2 years, 27th of February 2019, there was a meeting of the Deanery Synod. This is the Norwich East Deanery, which we're part of, at St Matthew's Church, Thorpe Hamlet. And as part of that synod, there was a session led by the rural dean of the time, Darren Thornton, on mission and evangelism. And it included contributions from young people who were on the diocesan ministry experience scheme. And I dare say there were other matters of business then, but that was the major item at that synod meeting. Then I did double check this, but that appeared to be the only synod meeting in 2019. This was before the pandemic or anything, so there was only one Deanery Synod meeting in the whole of that year. There were some other, I think there was an away day, perhaps that counted, or an away week, no, it was a day, I think, and one or two of you went on that. I didn't, that was in June. I'm not sure that was properly speaking a synod meeting, but it, you know, in terms of being a synod, but it was a Deanery Synod activity. The next, as far as I can see, proper synod meeting was on the 12th of February 2020. And this was at St Giles Church here in the city. It began with a Eucharist, a communion service, and which Father Darren presided at, and there was a farewell to him as he came to the end of his term as rural dean. And there were some general reports and updates given about deanery matters. At that point, the synod also had become aware that there were not just going to be one new rural dean, but two. And this would be shared between myself and my colleague and friend Lorna Allies. And each of us did speak briefly at that synod before we'd actually begun. Then there was a Deanery Synod meeting on Zoom on the 11th of November 2020. The first one with the two new rural deans. And as part of that synod, there was some discussion of the new Bishop of Norwich's vision and priorities, although it was slightly hampered by the fact that some of the papers hadn't been properly circulated before the synod, so it was a somewhat unsatisfactory discussion, I fear. And also matters connected to the environment and eco-ministry were also discussed at that synod. A short report on the activities of the Deanery Synod over 2 years, but I hope that's acceptable, even if brief. If any of our synod members wanted to add anything, then please do. Are you happy to receive that report and note it? I think that's a yes. We come now to a very important item of business, but I don't think it's controversial, the election of representatives of the laity to the Parochial Church Council. Members of the PCC are trustees of a charity, actually in our case quite a significantly sized charity. So this is a responsibility, and I'm very grateful to all who offer to serve in this way. Normally speaking, one would try and engineer it so that a 3-year term runs for, say, 3 people from year 1, and then 3 people from year 2, and 3 people from year 3. I don't know if I'm making sense. So you have a sense of a sort of, rotating finish of a term of office. For various reasons that I haven't completely deciphered, things have sort of clumped all in one place. I think to do with people changing from PCC to perhaps being elected as church warden, various other factors. So pretty much the entire PCC, for one reason or another, also connected to the fact we didn't have an AGM last year, have all kind of come to the edge of the cliff all at once. But luckily, very few are jumping off the edge. Although I should just note that probably the only person who's jumping off the edge, Anna, is you. So before we elect new people or people back onto the PCC, could we note our thanks to Anna Muskvina, for serving on the PCC, I think probably for at least 6 years, maybe it ended up being 7 with the extra year, 7, yeah, which is a very biblical number, so well done. I'm sure you're all aware that Anna is moving on to new and exciting things, training for ministry, training for ordination, which is absolutely wonderful. I'm delighted, and I know everyone is absolutely thrilled at that news, but we're also delighted and very grateful to you for serving on the PCC for the last 7 years. I think a little round of applause for Anna is also merited. Well done. But it does mean we need to elect a number of people. And although technically, when we elect someone, it's for 3 years, certain people on this list have indicated they would quite like to help stabilize the rotation and perhaps just do 1 or 2 years. Rather than bother you with the details on that, if you're happy, may I just present the candidates that have been given to me, all proposed and seconded, and then we can elect them and we can work out those details as we move along. So, I have got Francis Jackson, so Fran Jackson is happy to stand. Actually, would you mind standing up if you're here? I think pretty much everyone. So Fran, thank you so much. You've done 1 term and you're happy to stand again, so thank you. A new candidate, this is slightly in a random order depending on the sheet. So Jill Knox. Thank you, Jill, for agreeing to stand. You've been very much involved with the bell tower, and still are, of course, but we're very grateful to you as a member of the congregation that you might come and be on the PCC. You'll bring all sorts of gifts, I know, but also that link to the bell tower, which is invaluable, actually. So thank you, Jill. Stephanie Grant. So Stephanie, you were co-opted about a year ago. You would have been elected at last year's AGM, but we couldn't hold that. So having been co-opted and served for a year, this is now you properly being elected. Thank you very much. Julian Haggart. Julian, thank you so much for agreeing to stand again. You've served your first term 3 years and you're happy to stand for 3 more years, so thank you for that. Anne Tansley Thomas. I don't believe Anne is here tonight, but she's served, I think she's done 3 years. She may have done the extra 4, but anyway, she's happy to stand again. And that's very good. She brings particular expertise with media and communications. Sue Dartnell. Sue, I think you might be watching on YouTube and you can't wave back to me, or you can, but I can't really see you waving. But if you are watching, thank you so much for agreeing to stand. You're an invaluable member of the PCC. You particularly help with taking minutes at meetings, but also your advice and input is greatly welcomed. And then Richard Wilson, who is here. Richard, would you mind just standing for a second? Yep. So Richard, you've actually done a couple of terms, but you chair the Asset Management Committee, and just it would be helpful to, particularly the state we're in at the moment with the roof repair going on, it would be very helpful to have you on the PCC still, at least for another year, and maybe more. So you've been proposed as well. So there are, in fact, I think 9 spaces on the PCC, and we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 candidates, which leaves 2 gaps, which is no bad thing in terms of, perhaps being able to co-opt someone on or elect in due course. So just to remind you, but these have all been proposed and seconded, in fact, by the church wardens. If I just run through the 7 names again, are you happy to elect them en bloc? So Richard Wilson, Sue Dartnell, Anne Tansley Thomas, Julian Haggart, Stephanie Grant, Jill Knox, and Fran Jackson. All in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? All unanimously elected. Thank you very much indeed to all of you. We always have an item on the agenda, questions for the PCC to consider at their first meeting, which will be next month in May, and indeed any other business that anyone feels should be raised at this meeting. I don't want to skate over this. It's really important. This is the opportunity that any of you have to ask a question which the PCC will consider. However, don't make something up just for the sake of filling an empty gap. You don't need to do that. And indeed, there are always ways of you raising things with the church wardens or any of the members of the PCC. If you feel anything is important and should be raised, and that certainly happened last year on one particular issue I can think of, it's always possible to do that. However, now is a good moment if you wanted to raise something at the Apcm. But I can't see anyone leaping to their feet. And is there any other business along those lines? In which case, Rob, would you like to step forward? And I'm going to stand up at this point as well. Jodie James is our Director of Music, and we're extremely grateful to her for all that she does. But she's on maternity leave, and so she's not here tonight, of course, but also she's not able to lead our music while she's away on leave. And Rob, you kindly agreed to come and cover things for us as Acting Director of Music while Jodie's away. And because of the lockdowns and all the other things, and the Sunday mornings all being a bit constricted, it hasn't really been possible to say a proper welcome and hello to you. You started your first month or more, we were doing services with no congregation here. How strange is that, to arrive at a new place to do a role and there not being any people? But you've taken it in your stride and you brought all sorts of expertise. But we felt tonight might be a nice moment for you just to say hello to the church. Obviously a good number of people here and others watching. So thank you I'm very grateful to you for coming over tonight to be here. Very grateful indeed.
Got out of doing the bedtime stories.
Oh, right, yes. Yes, indeed, indeed.
No, I quite like those. It's the bath time.
Tell us just for a moment, but you know, not at too much length, but I'm sure there's lots to say. Tell us a tiny bit about your background in music, and particularly church music. You know, what made you excited about coming here to help us?
Well, I'm not sure how far to go back, really, being so old, really. But I'll go back to the fact that when I was a little one, I grew up in a church very similar to here, and that's kind of made me feel good about being at Mancroft, because it sort of took me back to my roots, really, of being this type of church. So I was a chorister in a beautiful market town in Cheshire called Nantwich. I don't know if anybody's been down there. Beautiful sandstone, red sandstone church, and that's where I started my choir singing. Alongside that, I enjoyed being on stage. I went to dancing school at the same time. So those have really been my two passions all along, as being music theatre and church music. So and I've continued that. And if the theatre was open, I could well be doing a show over at Theatre Royal and then coming here and conducting evensong. In fact, I think a few years ago I was doing a show at Theatre Royal, and then I was actually depping at the cathedral in between an afternoon performance and an evening performance at Theatre Royal, and I ran across town to sing evensong and then got back in the pit.
How fantastic!
So really, those are my two loves. So I'm delighted actually to be here just for the period of time that Jodie's having her baby, and so I'm really grateful to have been asked to take it on.
Oh, that's great, wonderful. Yes, so you've obviously got that tremendous background in music. You are actually a music teacher. Some of the other things that you do are teaching music. Do you want to just mention perhaps one or two tiny things about that as well?
Yeah, of course. So I trained at Birmingham embarked on a combined cathedral lay clerkship kind of jobs as a singer. I was an alto in those days, and as a teacher, and I've taught in several sort of private schools with chapel-based sort of private schools, including probably most notably Framlingham College down in Suffolk, where I was there for over a decade, where I very much enjoyed the choral side. I had three of my choristers were finalists in Chorister of the Year, and one won it within 5 years. If you've heard of Laura Wright, was one of my choristers there. So I've really enjoyed that sort of side, the education. Now I teach mainly one-to-one. I've sort of given up the classroom really, and just teaching one-to-one piano and singing mainly in Wyndham. So combines very well with this type of role.
That's good. You've been here about 3 months now.
Yeah.
What's most excited you about being here and what you've done for us so far in those 3 months?
Well, I think when I arrived, as Edward was saying, that you know it was very quiet. You know, My first 2 services was, I just had one singer, so I arrived to train one singer, and he cantored the service, and so it's really been here to almost be at the start again, really. You know, the waking up of the music that's had a short period of time with nothing. So, you know, I spent most of my time at first, you know, Zoom rehearsing, that word again, Zoom. So it really felt as if I was just getting to know people, not everybody here within these 2 choir stalls, but just bit by bit. And I was very excited just to meet everybody one by one. I don't think I've still met everybody yet. I've met the choristers in person on Monday, and we had our first rehearsal for a year, I think. So it's exciting to get them going again, and hopefully, you know, singing in worship very soon. The St. Peter Singers, I Zoomed with them for about 2 months. I don't know, I had no idea what they sounded like. I mean, they were all, you know, seemed to be enjoying themselves the other end of the Zoom call. And, you know, again on Monday, I met them for the first time. And we've got our first evensong this Sunday. So that's very exciting to get them back together again. Yeah.
And any other, you've touched on all that excitement, and it is like a new beginning, which is extraordinary. Any other hopes, perhaps, as you think ahead over the coming months and maybe into the autumn as well? Any thoughts and hopes for the music?
I think it's just really getting all the repertoire back up in the within the services, and hopefully introducing some of my favourite pieces as well to the church, so that we can, you know, can obviously continue Jodie's fantastic work, and to, you know, just get everybody just enjoying their singing. I hadn't mentioned Julian yet, but I've been blessed with having such a fantastic accompanist that, you know, we can arrive and we have perfect accompaniment. So I think the church is very thankful for having Julian as their organist, and Ellie, of course, who's done some accompanying for me as well. So I'm excited to where we can go in the next few months, when we get back to, you know, normal, as it were, and to get all our choirs going, to be able to combine them, to have more than the 8 singers that we're having, you know, on a Sunday morning, to be able to stand next door to each other in the choir stalls rather than at 2 meters spacing. So I think that would be exciting to, you know, to be able to do that. I think a lot of singers enjoy standing next to each other and being comforted and supported by each other. So I think once we get to that stage, we've almost got back to normal, haven't we?
It's been a tough year to be a singer or a member of a choir. This past year has been really, really dreadful. I mean, I know it's affected a lot of different groups and activities. The theatre you mentioned, it's been tough, but our, you know, our choirs have really suffered badly, but have kept going in various ways that you've hinted at, which is great. Well, now, you mentioned that you've got out of the bedtime routine, so just tell us for a moment, final question really, tell us a tiny bit about your family and perhaps any other things that are important to you in life.
Yeah, well, I've been married 6 years. So we married at Wyndham Abbey, and a year to the day we had our first child. So we don't get to celebrate our wedding anniversary so much on that day, because our Rose was born that day, and we've also got 2 other girls. So Rose, I think, is going to be very keen about joining the Mancroft Miners when she's 5 in July. And then Clara's 3 next week, actually, and the youngest, Freya, she was 9 months 2 days ago. So they're quite a handful. There's only 3 under 5s, but it's Mummy's a primary school teacher, so she has lots of activities to keep them busy. So we and my wife Lorna, she's enjoys singing as well. That's how we really met. We met at a music festival, a classical music festival down in Cornwall, actually, the St Endelian Music Festival, which is in a very small place, but it attracts really good musicians, actually. So we have music within us, and we enjoy singing, and Rose is very much enjoying singing. Mainly Frozen songs at the moment, but I think we'll branch off into some good choral music when the time allows.
Fantastic. Rob, thank you so much. Thank you for agreeing just to come to the meeting tonight and just share a few words. It's lovely just to be able to kind of feel like we've welcomed you in a slightly more human way, given all the strange circumstances. We're really grateful to you for stepping into the Director of Music role covering Jodie's leave.
Well, I'm delighted to be
at the most challenging of times, but you've taken it on with such enthusiasm. And I feel very blessed to be working with you, so thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Can we thank Rob by giving him a round of applause and welcoming him? And I'm sure there will be chances over the coming months, hopefully, please God, you know, we'll be able to perhaps use the churchyard to have a nice lunch together or something, who knows. But it'll be lovely to be able to have you as part of the church here over the coming months.
Great.
Thanks you again.
No problem.
Brilliant. So I had an exciting email today. Oh, Richard, did you want to ask something? Go for it, yeah, of course. So long as it's proper use of the meeting, but I'm happy to trust you.
Yes, I promise you this isn't an ambush, Edward, but I feel it would be remiss of us not just to say a few words of thanks to some key people here. It may be invidious mentioning people, but I'm going to anyway. And of course, the first person we've got to thank is Edward. I think during a frustrating and incredibly difficult year, Edward's shown imagination and vision just to keep this church rolling on. And I think more than that, he's probably raised the profile of this church within our community. And we should be very grateful for that. Of course, the incumbent here is not just a parish priest. He really is the CEO of quite a busy organization. And there's a lot else going on other than the priestly duties. And Edward seems to do that with remarkable enthusiasm and never, ever letting it get him down. I'm sure that in all this, he's supported by Sarah, his wife. And I think really we ought to salute you, Edward. And thank you very much. The second person I just wanted to mention is our treasurer, Jeff Loads. He's a behind-the-scenes man and quietly gets on with his dark art without any panic, without any drama, without any crisis. And year after year, he's presenting these reports to us, which allows the church to go on really from year to year with great security. I think if any of you are concerned about who's going to replace Rishi Sunak, you ought to be worrying right now about what's going to happen when Jeff needs replacing. Thank you, Jeff. When I first came to this church, Nick Jackson was the church warden. He's a person of many roles. He's a chorister, a sometimes choir master, a bell ringer, a mean trumpeter, and now he's fabric officer as well. And believe you me, there's a lot of fabric in this church that needs looking after. He's given and always has given his time generously and his knowledge freely. And I think we're very blessed to have somebody like that keeping the fabric of this church going. There have been 2 large projects in the last 2 or 3 years, and Nick has overseen these with great skill. Is Nick here? He's not, is he? And then the last person I'd just like to mention is our head verger, Chris Sallam. I think he likes to keep telling me that he's come from the other place. And I think it was quite an inspired appointment by Edward when you did appoint him. He's the person who's really the operations officer in the church. He keeps the whole thing going from day to day. He chases things up, he beavers away, and just allows the church to be presentable every day. Not only that, he's the events coordinator, and I know that he and Edward, although nothing has happened much this year, have a program, an ambitious program for things that are going to happen later when we're operating normally. And we're blessed with somebody like this, somebody you can go to ask which switch does what, who do you speak to about this, and he really is one of the key people in the church. And I think these people just need a vote of thanks. Thank you. I'm sorry to have ambushed your programme.
That's fine, thank you. But I will pick up what I was about to say, which is I had a very exciting email today, and it was from Jodie James, and she wrote this to me. We have news. We have been blessed with another little boy, Anarin Archie Edwin James, or Nye, so little baby Nye, who was born on Monday morning, so he's less than a week old, weighing 8 pounds and 11 ounces. That detail is always important somehow, isn't it? Sounds quite a good weight to me. I don't know, I'm not an expert. Getting some nods out there. And she says one or two other things. So far, Tal has taken well to having a baby brother and is very enamoured of him. And Jodie sent me a photograph, which will be in the newsletter that will be published tomorrow, so you'll have a chance to see. I can't believe Jodie is possibly watching this live stream. If she is, Jodie, well done. That's absolutely fantastic. Blessings for all of you. But I knew she was happy for me to share that news with the meeting tonight. So Rob, obviously, thank you for all you're doing here, but just so you know, Jodie has safely had her baby and now will be looking after family for who knows how long, I imagine with a view to coming back in due course. Isn't that lovely news? Really good. Well, item 15 included a conversation with Rob, thank you for that, but did also promise a short report from the vicar. And I just wanted to share a few words as we draw to the end of the meeting. And of course, I don't need to say again, it's been such an unusual past, well, 2 years really, but certainly a year. In fact, if we were to think back 2 years, and when I started giving a report on the activities of the PCC at the start of 2019, I don't know about you, but it felt like ancient history, really. It was like a former age. So much has changed. We've taken it in our stride to a certain extent, and bumps in the road, of course. And a lot of the normal patterns of life, in general, have been very disrupted, and certainly that's been true for the church. If you'd said to me before last March, Edward, what's going to happen is that the government will tell you that you cannot open, there can be no services, and what's more, you've got to stay at home. It's illegal to go out more than once a day. I mean, I don't know what you would have done, but I think I would have just laughed and said, don't be silly, that couldn't possibly happen. All of that has happened, and for good and proper reasons, of course. But I have to say, it did pain me considerably to know that the church wasn't able to open, and that even I was not really allowed to come in to the church, even to say prayers. I think I've shared with one or two of you, and it is a live stream, but never mind. If I'm arrested, you must come and visit me in prison. I did come into church, actually very regularly. It was legally allowed for one person to come in to check that the building was sound during the deepest moment of the lockdown. And I judged that the best way to tell if the church was sound was to do a quick roof test. And the way you do that is to sing some psalms. So I sang some psalms by way of a prayer as well. And the psalms echoed around, the roof was sound, and then I locked up and left. So a pattern of prayer was continued, even through the darkest days of that first lockdown. However, it was a great sadness that we weren't able to worship here, and indeed people weren't able to visit even for private prayer. I say all of that not by way of complaint, but by way of reminder really to us of how much we have had to take in our stride and how much we have managed to take in our stride as well. And indeed, really picking up on some of those kind words you just said, Richard, you know, we've done well, I think, over the last year, certainly. And in thinking back into 2019, some of the foundation stones being laid as well. I don't need to remind you that I'm actually still quite new here. 3 years ago, no one even knew about me at all. But nonetheless, I arrived by some kind of grace of God. And I have to say, I'm honoured, delighted, privileged to be here as the vicar. And thank you all for the way in which you've welcomed me and Sarah over the last couple of years. I think I can still just get away with saying that this year, not having had an AGM last year to say something like that. But rather than kind of wax lyrical at this stage, I think I do just want to commend to you again that review of the last couple of years and the great texture and tapestry of different things that make up the life of Mancroft. I think we should be in good heart, actually, despite all that's happened. And Jeff, you mentioned about investing for the future, just the sort of thing treasurers say, which is absolutely right. And I agree with that. You know, we've put in really good foundation stones, I think, not just me in the last 2.5 years, actually over a number of years. The plans had been made very carefully, some of the reordering here at the front. Decisions had been made over a number of years now, I think put us in a really good place. This church feels full of life. There are always things happening. You know, that weekly newsletter that comes out is always full of exciting things that seem to be bubbling along, which is really, really good. And of course, that lovely catchphrase that we have, a sort of mini vision, really, for us to be in the heart of the city, with the city in our hearts. I don't know who came up with that. I have a suspicion it might have been possibly, I don't know, Anne Tansey Thomas or Fran, maybe it was you or Anna or someone on the PCC. It's a lovely, lovely vision. And I think it's one that we should grow with and will grow with over the coming years. And I want just to add a comment or two more concrete, because that's all kind of apple pie and flannel so far, I know. And thank you for sitting patiently through all of that. But I think I want to just say something a little bit more concrete. For that to be true, I think there need to be two things and then a sort of connecting bridge between them. None of this is new. All of this makes perfect sense. But the first thing is we do need to be a thriving and a strong worshipping congregation. You know, we need to have people here on a Sunday, certainly, and at our services. We need to have that sense of when we come to worship, meeting with God, having that confidence in our faith, and that sense of being a vibrant, living, worshipping community. Sometimes churches do fade away and just die. And that's because something just, I don't know, begins to run into the sand, really, in terms of being a vibrant, worshipping community. And we absolutely need that to be strong here. And by the grace of God, it is strong. I was momentarily a tiny bit nervous before Palm Sunday, having not had any in-person worship for 2 months plus, wondering, you know, will anyone come back? Will there be a service? And we were full. And Easter Day, we were full. And that warms my heart. And it's a good thing, a good sign, a strong worshipping community. So that's the first thing. And then the other thing is all the other bits of the week and this building. And Richard, again, you touched on that in your kind words. A building, a place which is used by the city, by the community, by all sorts of groups, for all sorts of things. To make it sound a bit more like a vicar's description, God's Holy Spirit working in all the networks of this extraordinary city in which we live. People are always coming into this church for a variety of reasons, and a lot of that's been much quieter through 2020, but it will come back, and it is coming back. Things like the charity Christmas card shop, which drew lots of people. And I could mention all sorts of other things. And mention of Chris Sanham is a good thing to have done, Richard, because he is a key ally in terms of a key member of the staff to help work on all of that. with the events and the way in which the building is presented and welcomes people. So that's not so much the worshipping part of the church, that's this place in the heart of the city as a place where good things happen, godly things happen. And we're almost uniquely equipped to be able to do that here in Norwich. I know there are other city churches, but we are particularly well placed to do that. And of course, that vision has been strong here over many, many decades, but it's strong again now, certainly. And then there's the bridge between those two things. Because if I'm worried about anything, and I'm not worried, but if I'm worried about anything, it's that there could be a disconnect. Do you see what I mean? Between those two things. There could be very good Sunday worship, and then there could be all sorts of exciting things happening. And in a way, the danger is ne'er the twain do meet. And my hope and my prayer, and this is really, I think, what I will be focusing on over the coming years, hopefully with many other people as well, my hope and my prayer is that we can make sure the connections are good and strong between those two things. That doesn't mean if you come on a Sunday morning, you've got to come to 20 other things in the week. Not at all. But it means we need to know about what's happening, and we need to enjoy embracing the other things that are happening when we feel we should be more engaged with them, and that we should always be looking to moments when we can see this place used for a variety of things. And one of the particular bridge points actually is the ministry of welcoming visitors. And I know some of you here do that, and I'm very grateful to you. And I'm not at all going to insist that everyone comes along and welcomes people at the back for 2 hours every now and again, although I'd be delighted, for those of you who do that, and I know there are a number here who help with that. But it would be interesting if so many of us who worshipped on a Sunday felt we could offer a bit of help on that. It would be interesting because then we'd probably only have to do one slot every 6 weeks because there would be so many people helping. And whenever I do that, which I do as often as I can, and I start by thinking, it's a bit of a chore, oh dear, I've got to spend a couple of hours welcoming. At the end of my 2 hours, I actually genuinely, I'm not just saying this, I genuinely thank God for those 2 hours. Even if it's not been very many people coming through, because there always are conversations. Or someone's coming in wanting to have a look and think whether they could come and do an art exhibition here. And there are always conversations, and people from all around the world come to visit. You know, we're a destination here. And I just want to plant that thought, not just with you who are here tonight, but with hopefully others as well, that actually that bridge between the two parts of our life is something we mustn't forget, and we perhaps need to attend to. But I'm filled with confidence and hope that all of that will be tremendous as we look ahead. Well, in the review, right at the end, it quotes me a little bit, and I'll just read a tiny bit of it. There are so many people I want to thank. My colleagues in ministry and on the staff team, those who serve on the PCC in other ways, our musicians, our bell ringers, our flower arrangers. The list is huge. And I said then, other than my church warden colleagues, Peter and Helena, I shan't name anyone in particular because I want to name everyone. I'm not going to just mention a few people, I'm afraid, by name, because actually I do want to name everyone, and naming a few is always a challenging thing, of course. I want to thank everyone. The part you play is invaluable because the church is a living body in which everyone is not just needed, but is in fact infinitely precious. I'm humbled to think that God has called me to be a priest within such a church. And my calling to keep everyone in my prayers day by day is a great privilege. And it really is a privilege to be the vicar of Mancroft. And I thank God every morning as I wake up and realise that I still am and no one's pushed me off the cliff. And I'm excited for the future. And thank you for being part of it. I think we're reaching the end of our meeting. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us online as well. And just a reminder that actually what we've done tonight is had an act of worship. I'm going to close with a prayer. And perhaps we might stand actually for this prayer, just to get the circulation going a tiny bit. Visit this place, O Lord, and visit all our homes, we pray, and drive far from them the snares of the enemy. May your holy angels dwell with us and guard us in peace, and may your blessing be always upon us. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. And shall we pray the grace together as we finish? The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. I declare the meeting closed and the act of worship over.